Shane Shields navigated his sedan through the quiet suburban streets, the satisfaction of a productive conference still humming through his veins. As a dedicated high school history teacher, he relished these opportunities to enhance his craft. He was home earlier than expected, a rare treat that usually meant surprising his kids with impromptu ice cream runs. As he pulled into the driveway of the modest two-story house he shared with his wife Natalie and their 2 children, Shane noticed the curtains in the living room window flutter. He smiled, imagining his kids peeking out, eager for his return. He grabbed his briefcase from the passenger seat, filled with notes and new teaching materials he couldn't wait to implement. Approaching the front door, keys in hand, Shane paused. Natalie's voice drifted through the partially open living room window. Her hushed tone made him furrow his brow. "Listen, Cynthia," Natalie said, oblivious to Shane's presence. "Once he's done paying for the kid's private school, I'm filing for divorce. Then I'll accuse him of wrongdoing and live with Ryan and the kids off his money." Shane's hand froze on the doorknob. The world seemed to tilt as his brain processed the betrayal. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath the skin. For a moment, raw anger surged through him, urging him to burst through the door and confront her. But Shane was not a man of impulsive actions. He took a deep breath, forcing his racing heart to slow. His mind, usually occupied with lesson plans and historical dates, now worked with a different kind of strategy. Without making a sound, he retreated from the door and walked back to his car. He got in, started the engine, and drove away, heading towards the nearby Oakwood Park. The park was quiet at this hour, with only a few joggers and dog walkers dotting the landscape. Shane found an empty bench overlooking the duck pond and sat down. He stared at the placid water, his reflection fractured by the gentle ripples. His hands, usually steady whether writing on a chalkboard or grading papers, trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone. He hesitated for a moment, then opened his contact list. His thumb hovered over Natalie's name before scrolling past it. Instead, he tapped on Amelia Hawthorne, attorney at law. As the phone rang, Shane's mind whirled with plans. He would need evidence. He would need to protect his assets. Most importantly, he needed to ensure his children's future. Amelia Hawthorne's office, a crisp voice answered. "This is Shane Shields," he said, his voice low and controlled. "I need to schedule an urgent appointment with Amelia. It's regarding a divorce." There was a brief pause on the other end. "I see, Mr. Shields. Ms. Hawthorne has an opening tomorrow at 7 a.m. Would that work for you?" Shane nodded, then remembered he was on the phone. "Yes, that's perfect. Thank you." As he ended the call, Shane noticed a young couple walking hand in hand along the park's edge. They looked happy, carefree. He wondered if he and Natalie had ever truly been like that, or if it had all been an illusion. He stood up, straightening his shoulders. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, hard determination. As he walked back to his car, Shane began to formulate his plan. He would not be a victim. He would not let Natalie destroy everything he had worked for. By the time he pulled back into his driveway, the sun was setting. He took a moment to compose himself before entering the house. The sound of cartoons greeted him as he opened the door. Daddy, his 6-year-old daughter, Emily, came running, pigtails bouncing. He scooped her up, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Hey, princess," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "How was your day?" As Emily launched into a detailed account of her kindergarten adventures, Shane's eyes met Natalie's across the room. She smiled, the picture of a loving wife. "Welcome home, honey," she said. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour." Shane nodded, forcing a smile. "Sounds great. I'm just going to freshen up." As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Shane's mind was already racing ahead. He had a long night of planning ahead of him, but for now, he had to play the role of the unsuspecting husband. The game had begun, and Shane was determined to win. Over the next few weeks, Shane maintained a facade of normalcy that would have made any actor proud. He smiled at breakfast, asked about Natalie's day, and continued his routine of bedtime stories with the kids. But beneath this veneer of domestic tranquility, Shane was a man on a mission. Late one night, after Natalie had gone to bed, Shane carefully installed hidden cameras in strategic locations around the house. His hands were steady now, his movements precise. He positioned one in the living room, angled to capture the couch and the front door, another one in the kitchen, and a third in the home office. As he worked, Shane's mind drifted back to his first meeting with Amelia Hawthorne. The determined divorce attorney had listened intently as Shane laid out what he knew. Smart move, not confronting her immediately. Amelia had nodded approvingly. We'll need irrefutable evidence. Keep recording conversations. Document everything. And Shane, she leaned forward, her eyes hard. Don't let her suspect anything. The element of surprise will be crucial. Shane had nodded, his expression grim. I understand. I've already started gathering financial records. I'll get you everything you need. Now, as he carefully concealed the last camera, Shane felt a satisfaction. He was no longer the naive, trusting husband Natalie thought she could manipulate. The next morning, over breakfast, Natalie chatted animatedly about her plans for the day. I've got a big meeting with a potential client, she said, buttering her toast. It might run late, so don't wait up for me. Shane nodded, sipping his coffee. Good luck with the meeting. I hope it goes well. As Natalie left, kissing him goodbye with practiced affection, Shane wondered how many of her late meetings had actually been rendezvous with Ryan. That afternoon, while Shane was ostensibly at work, he sat in his car a block away from their house. He watched as a sleek sports car pulled into their driveway. Ryan Blackwood, looking every inch the smooth-talking real estate agent in his designer suit, stepped out and sauntered to the front door. Shane's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he watched Natalie open the door, pulling Ryan inside with a giggle. He forced himself to breathe deeply, reminding himself that every moment of their betrayal was now being recorded. Inside the house, unaware of the hidden cameras capturing their every move, Natalie and Ryan made themselves comfortable on the living room couch. Ryan poured 2 glasses of wine, Shane's wine, a gift from a grateful parent. Soon, we'll have it all, Ryan said, sipping the stolen wine. Shane won't know what hit him. Natalie laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. He's too naive to suspect anything. It's almost too easy. Ryan pulled her close, his hand trailing up her thigh. And once we've taken everything from him, we'll start our new life together. Just think, Nat. No more pretending, no more sneaking around. Natalie's eyes gleamed with anticipation. I can't wait. Sometimes Shane could barely stand to look at her, with her earnest talks about her students and her precious history lessons. Well, soon you won't have to, Ryan assured her. We'll take him for everything he's worth, and then some. Later that night, reviewing the footage, Shane's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of his desk. But his voice was steady when he called Amelia. I've got more evidence. You're going to want to see this. The next day, Shane met Amelia at her office, handing over a USB drive containing the damning footage. Excellent work, Shane, Amelia said, her tone businesslike. This, combined with the financial records you've provided, gives us a strong case. But we're not done yet. Keep gathering evidence. The more we have, the stronger our position when we make our move. Shane nodded. I understand. I'll keep you updated. As he left Amelia's office, Shane felt a mix of emotions. Anger at Natalie's betrayal, disappointment at her and Ryan's actions, but also a satisfaction. He was no longer a pawn in their game. He was taking control, and soon they would learn just how badly they had underestimated him. As Shane methodically built his case against Natalie, an unexpected challenge arose at work. The school board called an emergency meeting to discuss budget cuts. The history department, deemed non-essential by some board members, was on the chopping block. Shane sat in the staff room, surrounded by his worried colleagues. The atmosphere was tense, filled with whispered conversations and nervous glances. They can't just cut the entire department, Sarah, the American history teacher, said, her voice trembling. What about our students? Mark, who taught world history, shook his head glumly. You know how it is. When budgets get tight, history is always the first to go. They'll keep math and science. Maybe throw us a bone with a single social studies class. Shane listened to their concerns, his mind already formulating a plan. He stood up, drawing everyone's attention. We're not going down without a fight, he said, his voice firm. We need to show the board, the parents, everyone, why history education is crucial. Who's with me? The room fell silent for a moment. Then Sarah spoke up. What did you have in mind, Shane? Shane smiled, a spark of his old passion igniting. We're going to organize, rally the parents, prepare a presentation for the board, show them exactly what they'd be losing if they cut our department. Over the next few days, Shane threw himself into the campaign to save the history department. He organized his colleagues, rallied supportive parents, and prepared a compelling presentation for the next board meeting. His nights, once filled with quiet despair over his crumbling marriage, now buzzed with a new purpose. One evening, as Shane pored over budget reports and drafted talking points, Natalie sauntered into his home office. She perched on the edge of his desk, her pose deliberately provocative. Why are you spending so much time on this? She asked, her tone a mixture of irritation and feigned concern. It's not like your job matters that much. Shane bit back, the cutting retort that sprang to his lips. Instead, he met her gaze calmly. Every job matters, Natalie. Every person matters. Natalie rolled her eyes, oblivious to the irony of his words. Whatever. Just don't forget we have dinner with the Andersons on Friday. Try to be on time for once. As she left, swaying her hips in a way that once would have captivated him, Shane turned back to his work. The dinner with the Andersons, Ryan's business partners, would go ahead as planned. It was all part of maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Friday evening arrived, and with it the Andersons. Shane played the role of gracious host perfectly, pouring wine and engaging in pleasant small talk. His smile never wavered, even when Ryan Blackwood made a surprise appearance halfway through the meal. Hope you don't mind me crashing the party, Ryan said with a wolfish grin. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Shane noticed the quick, heated glance between Ryan and Natalie. He raised his glass in a toast, his voice steady. To more, the merrier. Welcome, Ryan. As the evening wore on, Shane observed the subtle touches, the lingering looks between his wife and her companion. He cataloged each one, adding them to the mountain of evidence he was accumulating. So, Shane, one of the board members said, swirling his wine glass, Natalie tells us you're having some trouble at work. Budget cuts, was it? Shane nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Yes, the school board is considering some reductions, but we're working on a plan to show them the value of maintaining a strong history department. Ryan chuckled, the sound grating on Shane's nerves. Seems like a lot of effort for a subject most kids sleep through. No offense, Shane. None taken, Shane replied smoothly. History might not be everyone's favorite subject, but understanding our past is crucial for shaping our future. It's about more than just memorizing dates and names. Natalie cut in, her tone dismissive. Let's not bore everyone with work talk, dear. Who wants dessert? As Natalie bustled off to the kitchen, Shane caught Ryan's appraising look. For a moment, he wondered if Ryan saw him as a rival or merely an obstacle to be removed. Either way, Shane knew he was more than ready for the challenge. Later that night, after their guests had left and Natalie had gone to bed, Shane sat alone in his study. He pulled out a small notebook and jotted down his observations from the evening. Then he opened his laptop and began composing an email to Amelia. Another productive week, he wrote. I think we're almost ready to make our move. He hit send, then leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the star-studded sky. A storm was coming, he knew. But this time, He would be the one controlling the lightning. As he closed his laptop, Shane's thoughts turned to the upcoming school board meeting. He had two battles to fight now, one at home and one at work, but he was determined to win both. He wouldn't let Natalie destroy his family, and he wouldn't let short-sighted bureaucrats destroy his passion for teaching. With renewed determination, Shane began to review his notes for the board meeting presentation. He had always taught his students about the great figures in history who had faced seemingly insurmountable odds and triumphed. Now it was his turn to embody that resilience and strength. As the night deepened, Shane worked tirelessly, his mind clear and focused. He was no longer just fighting for his job or his marriage. He was fighting for his future, for his children, and for the principles he held dear. And he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Shane Shields stood at the podium, his gaze sweeping across the packed auditorium. School board members, parents, and fellow teachers filled the seats, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. This was it, the moment that could make or break the history department. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, fighting to preserve the past while his own future hung in the balance. But unlike his personal life, this was a battle he could wage in the open. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, concerned parents, and colleagues, Shane began, his voice strong and clear. We're here today to discuss more than just budget cuts. We're here to decide the value we place on understanding our shared history. As Shane launched into his carefully prepared presentation, he could see the board members leaning forward. Their interest piqued. He laid out compelling statistics, shared moving testimonials from students, and painted a vivid picture of a future where historical ignorance led to repeated mistakes. By cutting the history department, Shane concluded, his passion evident in every word. We're not just eliminating classes. We're erasing our children's connection to their heritage, their understanding of how we got here, and their ability to shape where we're going. I urge you to reconsider this decision. Thank you. The room erupted in applause as Shane stepped away from the podium. He could see several board members nodding approvingly, while parents turned to each other, engaged in animated discussions. As the meeting adjourned, the school superintendent approached Shane, a smile on his face. That was quite a speech, Mr. Shields. I think you've given us all a lot to think about. Shane nodded, allowing himself a small smile. Thank you, sir. I just hope it was enough. It wasn't until he was driving home that the full impact of the evening hit him. He had done it. He had not only saved the history department, but secured a promotion to department head. A sense of triumph washed over him, temporarily pushing aside the turmoil of his personal life. As he pulled into his driveway, Shane noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the sleek sports car, Ryan Blackwood's car. Inside, he found Natalie and Ryan in the living room. Their heads were close together as they whispered and giggled. They sprang apart as Shane entered, guilt flashing across Natalie's face before she masked it with a bright smile. Shane, you're home early. Ryan just stopped by to drop off some paperwork for a case we're working on. Shane raised an eyebrow, his voice deceptively calm. Is that so? How convenient that he arrived just as I was due home. Ryan stood, smoothing down his designer suit. Hey there, Shane. Hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. You know how it is in our line of work. Always on the clock. Shane's jaw tightened, but he managed a cordial nod. Not at all, Ryan. Always a pleasure. As Ryan made his excuses and left, Shane turned to Natalie. I have some news. The board meeting went well. They're not only keeping the history department, but they've promoted me to department head. Natalie's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Oh well, that's unexpected. Congratulations, I suppose. Shane watched her carefully, noting the lack of enthusiasm in her voice. Thanks. I thought we could celebrate. Maybe open that bottle of champagne we've been saving. Natalie's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. Of course, darling. Let me just freshen up first. As she disappeared upstairs, Shane allowed himself a smile. He had seen the panic in her eyes, the quick glance towards her phone. No doubt she was already texting Ryan, rearranging whatever plans they had made for the evening. Shane moved to the kitchen, pulling out the champagne and 2 flutes. As he popped the cork, he couldn't help but wonder how many more of these false celebrations he would have to endure before he could finally reveal the truth. The next morning, Shane rose early, his mind already racing with the day's tasks. He had a meeting with Amelia scheduled for lunch, and he knew today would be crucial in setting their plans in motion. As he made coffee, Natalie shuffled into the kitchen, looking worse for wear. God, my head is pounding. I think the champagne went straight to my head last night. Shane handed her a mug, his voice solicitous. Here, this should help. You seemed pretty out of it last night. I was worried you might be coming down with something. Natalie avoided his gaze, mumbling her thanks as she sipped the coffee. Shane watched her, noting the faint smudge of lipstick at the corner of her mouth, a shade he knew she didn't own. I've got a busy day ahead, Shane said casually. Meetings all afternoon. Don't wait up for dinner. Natalie nodded, relief evident in her posture. That's fine. I've got a late meeting myself. I'll probably grab something with the team. As Shane left for work, he allowed himself a small bitter smile. He knew exactly what kind of team meeting Natalie had planned. The day passed in a blur of classes and administrative tasks. At lunch, Shane met Amelia at a discreet cafe across town. The determined attorney listened intently as Shane updated her on the latest developments. Excellent work, Shane. Amelia nodded approvingly. You've built an ironclad case. I think it's time we make our move. Are you ready? Shane's eyes hardened. More than ready. What's the next step? Amelia laid out their strategy, her voice low and precise. By the time lunch was over, Shane felt a sense of satisfaction. The net was closing in, and neither Natalie nor Ryan had any idea. That afternoon, Shane executed the first part of their plan. He transferred funds from their joint accounts to a secure account in his name, canceled all shared credit cards, and informed the children's school that only he was authorized to make decisions about their education. As he drove home that evening, Shane's phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Cards declined. What's going on? He ignored it, knowing she would be home soon, demanding answers. It was time for the confrontation he had been preparing for weeks. Shane was in his study when he heard the front door slam. Natalie's heels clicked angrily on the hardwood floor as she stormed towards him. What is going on, Shane? She demanded, her face flushed with anger. Why are our cards not working? Why can't I access our accounts? Shane looked up calmly, his expression unreadable. I think you know why, Natalie. Or should I ask Ryan? I'm sure he'd be happy to explain. The color drained from Natalie's face. Dooley, what are you talking about? Drop the act. Shane's voice was cold, controlled. I know everything. The affair, your plans to divorce me, the false accusations you were planning to make. Did you really think I was that naive? Natalie's shock quickly turned to fury. How dare you? She shrieked. You had no right to spy on me. No right. Shane stood, his anger finally showing. I had every right. You're my wife. Between her little rendezvous with Ryan, he pulled out a folder, slapping it on the desk. Here's everything. The recordings, the photos, the financial records showing how you've been siphoning money to a secret account. It's all here, Natalie. Your little plan is over. Natalie's eyes darted from the folder to Shane's face, realization dawning. You've ruined everything. She hissed. No, Natalie. You did that all on your own, Shane replied, his voice steady. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be hearing from her soon. I suggest you find yourself a good attorney. You're going to need one. As Natalie stormed out of the room, hurling threats and insults, Shane sank back into his chair. The confrontation he had been dreading for weeks was over, but he knew this was just the beginning of a long, bitter battle. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Shane moved into the guest room, avoiding Natalie as much as possible. She alternated between fits of rage and attempts at manipulation, but Shane remained unmoved. One evening, as Shane was helping the kids with their homework, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. This isn't over." Shane deleted the message without responding. He had expected Ryan to get involved eventually. Let them plot and scheme. He was ready for whatever they threw at him. What he wasn't prepared for, however, was the lengths to which Natalie and Ryan would go to try and salvage their plan. It started with whispers at work, colleagues giving him odd looks, hushed conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Then came the meeting with the principal. "Shane, I'm going to be blunt," Principal Harriet Dawson said, her expression grave. "We've received some concerning information about you. There are allegations of financial impropriety." Shane's mind raced. Of course, Natalie and Ryan were trying to frame him for embezzlement. "What kind of allegations?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. Principal Dawson slid a file across her desk. "These records suggest you've been misappropriating funds from the school's history department budget. Given your recent promotion, this is a very serious matter." Shane leafed through the documents, his anger growing with each page. The forgeries were good, he had to admit. "These records are false," he said firmly, meeting the principal's gaze. "I can prove it. Give me 24 hours, and I'll have evidence that not only clears my name but shows who's really behind this." Principal Dawson hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Shane, you've always been an exemplary teacher. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But if you can't disprove these allegations," Principal Dawson continued, "I understand." Shane replied, standing. "Thank you for the opportunity." As he left the office, Shane's mind was already working on his countermove. He had been meticulous in documenting all school finances since taking over as department head. It was time to put that diligence to use. That night, as Natalie slept, Shane worked tirelessly, compiling financial records, cross-referencing budgets, and creating a comprehensive report that not only cleared his name but raised serious questions about who had access to the school's financial information. The next morning, Shane presented his findings to Principal Dawson and the school board. The evidence was irrefutable. Not only was Shane innocent, but the attempted frame-up pointed to someone with insider knowledge of the school's systems. "This is quite something," one of the board members said, looking up from the report. "Mr. Shields, we owe you an apology, and it seems we have a serious security breach to investigate." As the meeting adjourned, Shane felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had overcome this hurdle, but he knew the war was far from over. Returning home that evening, Shane found Natalie pacing in the living room, her face a mask of barely contained rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" She sped as soon as he walked in. "How dare you accuse me of trying to frame you?" Shane regarded her coolly. "I didn't accuse you of anything, Natalie, but it's interesting that you immediately assume I'm talking about you. Guilty conscience." Natalie's face contorted with fury. "You'll pay for this, Shane. I swear, I'll ruin you." As she stormed out, Shane sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. He pulled out his phone, dialing Amelia's number. "It's done," he said. "They tried to frame me for embezzlement, but I managed to clear my name. What's our next move?" Amelia's voice was grim but satisfied. "Good work, Shane. Now we go on the offensive. It's time to file for divorce and hit them with everything we've got." As Shane ended the call, he gazed at the family photos lining the mantel. So much had changed in such a short time. But as he looked at his children's smiling faces, he knew that every battle, every sleepless night, every moment of pain had been worth it. He would protect them, no matter the cost. The courthouse loomed before Shane, a monument of justice that would soon bear witness to the unraveling of his marriage. He straightened his tie, a gesture more of habit than vanity, and ascended the stone steps. Amelia Hawthorne, his determined divorce attorney, walked beside him, her briefcase a veritable Pandora's box of evidence against Natalie. As they pushed through the heavy oak doors, Shane caught sight of Natalie and her lawyer huddled in whispered conference. Natalie's eyes, once warm with false affection, now sparked with a mixture of fear and hatred. Shane met her gaze unflinchingly, his jaw set in determination. "Remember, Amelia," she murmured, "let me do the talking. You've done your part. Now it's time to let the evidence speak for itself." Shane nodded, taking his seat at the plaintiff's table. The judge, a stern-faced woman with salt and pepper hair, called the court to order. "In the matter of Shields versus Shields," she intoned, "we will now hear opening statements." Amelia rose, her posture radiating confidence, began. "Your Honor, what we have before us today is not merely a case of marital discord or irreconcilable differences. This is a case of premeditated betrayal, conspiracy, and attempted fraud on a grand scale." As Amelia laid out their case, Shane watched the judge's expression shift from professional neutrality to barely concealed disappointment. Exhibits were presented. Financial records showing Natalie's secret accounts, transcripts of recorded conversations plotting Shane's downfall, and damning photographs of Natalie's infidelity. Natalie's lawyer, a nervous young man who seemed increasingly out of his depth, attempted to object at various points, but each objection was swiftly overruled. Shane could see the panic growing in Natalie's eyes as the mountain of evidence against her grew. When it came time for the defense to present their case, Natalie's lawyer fumbled through a weak argument about misunderstandings and marital stress. It was clear he knew they were fighting a losing battle. Then, in a move of desperate audacity, Natalie herself requested to address the court. The judge, eyebrow raised, allowed it. Natalie approached the stand, her face a mask of practiced vulnerability. "Your Honor," she began, her voice trembling with well-rehearsed emotion, "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm the victim here. Shane, he's not the man you see before you today. Behind closed doors, he's controlling, manipulative. He's abused me for years, emotionally, and—" A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Shane's hands clenched beneath the table, but his face remained impassive. He had anticipated this move. "Objection, Your Honor," Amelia said, rising smoothly. "This is the first time any allegation of abuse has been raised, and we have evidence that directly contradicts Mrs. Shields' claims." The judge nodded. "Proceed, counselor." Amelia approached the bench, producing a USB drive. "Your Honor, I'd like to present Exhibit G. These are video recordings from the Shields home, installed by my client out of concern for his and his children's safety when he first became aware of Mrs. Shields' infidelity and plans to frame him." As the footage played on the courtroom's monitor, Natalie's face drained of color. The video showed not Shane, but Natalie herself engaging in emotionally abusive behavior, berating Shane, manipulating their children, even throwing objects in fits of rage. "As you can see, Your Honor," Amelia continued, her voice cold, "the only abuse in this household came from Mrs. Shields herself." The judge's expression hardened as she turned to Natalie. "Mrs. Shields, making false accusations of abuse is a serious offense. Do you wish to recant your statement?" Natalie, her composure crumbling, could only nod mutely. The rest of the proceedings passed in a blur. When the judge finally delivered her ruling, her voice rang with unmistakable disappointment for Natalie's actions. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, this court grants Mr. Shields' petition for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Furthermore, Mr. Shields is granted full custody of the children, with Mrs. Shields to pay alimony and child support." As the gavel fell, Shane felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He turned to Amelia, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. Amelia nodded, a rare smile crossing her features. "You did the hard part, Shane. I just presented the facts. Now let's get you and your children home." As they left the courtroom, Shane caught sight of Natalie, slumped in her chair, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, He felt a twinge of, not regret, but perhaps pity. Then he remembered the coldness in her eyes as she had plotted to destroy him, and the feeling passed. Shane stepped out into the sunlight, ready to begin the next chapter of his life. The weeks following the divorce were a whirlwind of change. Shane found himself navigating a new reality, one where he was both mother and father to his children, where whispers followed him in the grocery store, and where his phone buzzed constantly with messages of support and the occasional harsh text from Natalie. One sunny Saturday morning, as Shane was helping his daughter Emily with her science project, the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Cynthia, Natalie's sister, standing on his porch. Her face was drawn, eyes red-rimmed from what looked like days of crying. "Shane," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't know where else to go. Can we talk?" Shane hesitated for a moment, then nodded, stepping aside to let her in. They sat at the kitchen table, the half-finished science project a colorful barrier between them. "I'm so sorry," Cynthia blurted out, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I had no idea. Natalie told me you were the one. God," she continued, "I feel so foolish." Shane pushed a box of tissues towards her. "You weren't the only one she fooled, Cynthia." Cynthia dabbed at her eyes. "When I heard that phone call, I thought she was confiding in me about your supposed abuse. I never imagined she was the one plotting and cheating." Shane, his tone not unkind but skeptical, finished for her. Cynthia's shoulders slumped. "I don't know. I'd like to think I would have. But she's my sister. Was my sister," she corrected herself. "After what she's done, I can't. I just can't." Shane nodded, understanding all too well the pain of severing ties with someone you thought you knew. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I'm not sure," Cynthia admitted, "but I couldn't go on without apologizing to you, without you knowing that I never meant to be part of her scheme." As Cynthia left, Shane felt a strange mix of emotions. The apology didn't undo the pain of the past months, but it was a step towards healing. A reminder that not everyone in his life had been false, that not everyone was against him. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Shane sat in his study, staring at the blank document on his computer screen. The cursor blinked steadily, an electronic heartbeat waiting for words. Almost without conscious thought, Shane began to type. He wrote about betrayal, about the shock of discovering that the person you thought you knew best was a stranger. He wrote about the strength it took to stand up for oneself, to protect not just your assets, but your very sense of self. As the words flowed, Shane realized he was doing more than just venting. He was creating a roadmap, a guide for others who might find themselves in similar situations. By the time he finally looked up, the first rays of dawn were peeking through his window. The next day, Shane reached out to a few of his colleagues who had gone through divorces. They met for coffee, sharing stories and advice. As they talked, an idea began to form in Shane's mind. "What if," he said slowly, "we started a support group for men who've been through what we have? False accusations, gaslighting, the works." The others nodded enthusiastically, and within weeks, the group was a reality. They met in the community center, a growing circle of men finding strength through shared experiences and mutual support. It was after one of these meetings that Shane received an unexpected call. Natalie's name flashed on his phone screen, sending a jolt of adrenaline through him. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Shane." Natalie's voice was small, almost unrecognizable. "I need to talk to you. Please." Shane's grip tightened on the phone. "I think we've said all we need to say to each other, Natalie. Please," she begged. "I've lost everything. My job, my friends. Even Cynthia won't talk to me. I know I made mistakes, but mistakes." Shane cut her off, his voice cold. "You didn't make mistakes, Natalie. You made choices, deliberate, calculated choices to destroy me and take everything I cared about. And now you're facing the consequences of those choices. But I've changed," Natalie pleaded. "I've realized how wrong I was. If you could just give me another chance. No, Shane said firmly. You made your choice, Natalie. Now live with it. As he ended the call, Shane felt a sense of finality. The last tie to his old life had been severed, and he was ready to fully embrace the new months past and life settled into a new rhythm. Shane found himself thriving in his role as department head, his innovative teaching methods drawing attention from educators across the state. But it wasn't his role as a single father that he found the most fulfillment. One crisp autumn morning, Shane stood before his class, the familiar excitement of sharing knowledge buzzing through him. But today's lesson was different. Today, he wasn't just teaching history. He was teaching life. His voice carried to the back of the classroom. We're going to talk about resilience, about facing adversity, and coming out stronger on the other side. The students leaned forward, intrigued. Many of them knew pieces of Shane's story. It was hard to keep secrets in a small town, but they had never heard him speak of it directly. Throughout history, Shane continued, we see examples of individuals and societies facing seemingly insurmountable odds. The American Revolution, the Civil Rights Movement, the fall of the Berlin Wall. But resilience isn't just for the history books. It's a quality we can all cultivate in our daily lives. As Shane spoke, weaving historical examples with personal anecdotes, he could see the impact his words were having. Students who usually dozed through class were alert, engaged. Those who struggled with their own challenges sat up straighter, hope kindling in their eyes. Remember, Shane concluded, adversity doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. You are all capable of incredible strength and resilience. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. As the bell rang and students filed out, many lingered to thank Shane, some even sharing their own stories of overcoming obstacles. Shane felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of purpose that went beyond teaching dates and facts. Later that afternoon, as Shane was packing up to leave, there was a knock at his classroom door. He looked up to see a woman in a smart business suit, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Mr. Shields, she said, extending her hand. I'm Sarah Blackwood from Pinnacle Publishing. Do you have a moment to talk? Intrigued, Shane invited her in. Sarah took a seat, her posture radiating enthusiasm. I'll get straight to the point, Mr. Shields, she said. Word of your story has been spreading, and not just in this town. Your resilience, your fight for justice, your work with the support group, it's inspiring. We believe your experience could help so many people if it were shared more widely. Shane leaned back in his chair, surprised. Are you suggesting? Sarah nodded. We'd like to offer you a book deal, Mr. Shields. Your story in your words. What do you say? For a moment, Shane was speechless. Then, slowly, he nodded. If it helps even one person avoid what I went through, it's worth sharing. As Sarah left, promising to send over a contract, Shane sat at his desk, a bit dazed by this new turn of events. His phone buzzed with a text from the babysitter, reminding him it was time to pick up the kids. Shane gathered his things, a smile playing on his lips. Life had thrown him curveballs, but he had not only survived, he had thrived. As he walked to his car, he saw his children waiting, their faces lighting up at his approach. Emily waved excitedly, while his son Michael held up a drawing he'd made in art class. Shane felt a surge of love and gratitude. Despite everything, he had emerged stronger, wiser, and still capable of love. He had turned his pain into a force for good, helping others while building a better life for himself and his children. As they drove home, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant hues, Shane glanced in the rearview mirror at his children. They were chattering happily, untouched by the shadows of the past. Shane smiled, knowing that while the road had been hard, it had led them to this moment, driving into a future filled with hope and new possibilities. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had instead become the catalyst for a richer, more authentic life. As they turned onto their street, Shane felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them with resilience, courage, and love. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.